Have you ever wondered about the desperate lives of those who are totally dominated by their substance use addictions? Who live in what seems to us as wretched circumstances? Why is it that most can't extricate themselves from their situations, or seemingly don't care to? You might also wonder, how did these drug users get in their situations in the first place? How can they be helped? With the appearance of fentanyl on our streets in recent years, the problem has become even more dire. Deaths have skyrocketed among the diehards and also among casual drug users, many of whom, if they don't die, end up becoming seriously addicted. To make matters worse, the addiction problem has frighteningly escalated during the pandemic. There has been 31 overdose deaths in Westminster in the past year. NewWest's internationally recognized and multi-award-winning photographer, Gabor Gasztonyi, has spent years photographing in Vancouver's notorious downtown Eastside. He produced a book, A Room in the City, which shows intimate and empathetic portraits of people who are burdened by their addictions and portrays stark images of how they live. More recently, he made a multi-award-winning documentary that follows the lives of two middle-aged couples living there who really have no way out. Gabor has many insights. To start, I asked how these people saw their own lives.
To them, addiction is a normal life. And, we kind of tend to look at it from the outside, and we can't understand the fact that this is everyday life. And for the folks that do have these addictions, that's exactly what it is. And they don't really want or know anything different. There's a lot of factors with addiction. One of the reasons I think a lot of folks in society get confused is that, they drive down to Hastings or they walk along there and they see this kind of behavior on the streets. And a lot of that is self-defensive behavior. It's not that they are really like that. When you meet folks in their own homes, they're completely different. And when they're on the street, they can engage in sort of defensive behavior against other. There's a lot of predators in that area in terms of cash, drugs, all this sort of stuff. So many folks that have drugs and that are ill have to find ways of protecting themselves. I found my experiences in the downtown east side, not so much on the streets, but actually within the homes of folks that I came to know really well, was the incredible spiritual quality of their lives, which I never cease to amaze me. Many of them have insights into life that a lot of us don't appreciate and don't really live those insights. Many people I've known, they speak of dreams, they speak of spiritual aspirations. Many of the native people in the area, which is significant proportion, speak of different spirits that they influence their lives in different ways. Often if you go down to downtown east side, it is almost a mini reserve in terms of a collection of native people, and probably a good 50% of the folks there are First Nations in one way or another. Some of them not even from British Columbia, from as far away as Manitoba. And there's actually little areas, of native culture, like on the corner of Hastings and Maine. There's a group there that are together usually in different forms, and they have a common tradition. Many of them are like from the Haida background. And you go to another part of the downtown east side and you have other First Nations groups, which is kind of interesting. Addiction is really a result of childhood abuse of some form or another. And my friend Gabor Gasztonyi, the doctor, and him and I kind of agree on the same thing. Uh, if you do see my film, the people in there talk about their childhood, um, talk about the different abusive situations they've been as really young children. I got to know many people in the downtown East Side um, just by the photographic process. To be successful in that endeavor, one has to actually create relationships with folks, gain their trust in terms of photography. The worst thing one can do, and I tell young people that if you hope to photograph in the area, please don't walk around with a camera and uh, arbitrarily take images of folks because they get very, very angry. But as I was doing a lot of that street photography, and I started to get to know people there. I actually went into the rooms of the various hotels um, that they lived in the downtown East Side, and some of those now are actually being demolished or taken over by the government. The way they were run, there were really no rules for the residents. People kind of came and went as they wished. They had their different rooms. They socialized amongst each other. Um, Everyone knew where the dope dealer was and what floor he was in, and it was a really incredible, intricate weave of different things going on with drugs and prostitution, all these various things. But in a sense, as a word of caution, with government taking these structures over, um, I did find over the years that many of the folks in downtown Eastside had real difficulty following rules. Uh, for example, if the government takes over a building, they have to impose all kinds of rules and all this sort of stuff. And all these people just cannot, for some reason, mentally, psychologically, abide by these rules. And so they won't go there. They'll keep going on the street. And there was a certain charm about the way it was, although it was not, I mean, the buildings were terrible, everything leaked, it was terrible buildings. Many of the repairs were done by residents themselves, paid by the Soda family and so on. But everything kind of worked together, and people were able to live. They could go from one place to another, and it's ironic that one thinks, well, we're gonna build housing, we're gonna make it better, and yet in the same breath, we're actually making it slightly worse. As I gained friendship with these folks and were able to photograph them as they see themselves in an honest way, I noticed the incredible spirituality of folks there, and the incredible sense of belonging and relationships with other folks in the community, which is quite powerful. Although today I go down there, of course I haven't been down there much this year with COVID. There seems to be a massive change in the personalities of the folks there uh, in terms of the drugs that they're addicted to. Towards kind of the middle of my film, around 2015, 2016, the fentanyl crisis just started to rear its ugly head. And before that, the folks, for example, in my movie, they had reliable dealers that they would obtain their drugs from, and they were very confident that their drugs were good, and they've never been involved with fentanyl. One of the people in the film actually uh, did wind up getting fentanyl by accident, and his partner brought him back to life in a sense. Hadn't it been for her, he probably would have died. And I guess the technique is that they take good drugs and cut it with this cheaper product, um, and the temptation being money. Um, and we're actually poisoning people. And unfortunately, the people that are actually doing the selling, they're just sick people themselves. They're drug addicts, basically, that are ill, that are addicted. And they basically do whatever they're told. There's a real structure in the whole thing. The people that are actually bringing all this stuff in and making all noodles of cash. You never see them, you never hear about them. All you see on the street are dealers that are very ill addicts themselves. And it's very sad to see all that. But that's the structure and the way it works. It's very odd. When I first started filming there and photographing, I never felt ever that I was in danger in terms of my own self. But today I feel different. I think there's a lot of some of these drugs are creating some incredibly bizarre behavior that one didn't really see 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago.
For example, what kind of behavior?
Just erratic behavior, a lot of swearing, a lot of jumping up and down, a lot of brutality amongst folks and friends and so on that they never would have injured before, and now we see that kind of behavior going on, which makes it a little bit difficult. And I do notice an incredible drop of population. I'm not sure how many people, when I first started doing the book, were actually alive today. Many of them have died, and
Must be hard on you.
it is, because even when I did the film, the main actor did the part in the film, he actually died at the end of the movie. And that was very, very difficult for me to deal with, because I'd known this guy for 12 years, and we were pretty well friends, and very sad to see that. The other overriding thing that one learns, being the downtown East Side and photographing as long as I did, was that all the people that you meet were abused as children in one form or another. I would say 80% of the males in the downtown East Side were sexually abused as children, at times brutally. One of the protagonists in our film was at a Catholic reform school in Ontario, and he was abused there as a young child for a long time. And that type of behavior, or that type of unfortunate situation, has incredible psychological impact on children. And they suffer incredible amounts of pain. And drugs, in a sense, are able to relieve that pain and allow for a period of relaxation and just an elimination of pain. The problem is that once you eliminate the pain and you continue on the route of drugs, more drugs are never enough. You don't know how to stop. You don't know when to stop. It takes over your life in a sense, and there is really no way out of it. And you hear all these stories about rehabilitation and all that kind of stuff, and I think there are people that do rehabilitate them. It's very rare, though, very rare. These drugs have become so powerful in the psyche. And as far as women go, I would say 100% of the women in the downtown East Side were abused as children. I can very safely say that. And the same situation, folks get addicted to drugs as a relief from pain. Now, presumably there are other factors as well. Some psychiatrists say, well, there's also people with bipolar conditions and all these various things. So it's a very difficult situation to deal with. And there have been so many people trying different things over the years, so much money being put into it. I don't know if we really have an answer. I guess the popular theory today is to administer these drugs medically, treat it as a medical problem. And, I do agree with that. But the thing is, this has been done in the past, and folks will receive these drugs medically, but after they've left the doctor's office, they'll still be looking for more.
I see.
And the doctor is never able to give you enough. There's always a need for more. The same with very severe alcoholics. And of course, we have less alcoholics today than we had years ago. And alcoholism was, of course, a big problem in the, 30, 40 years ago, our parents and so on. Like an alcoholic doesn't know when to stop drinking and will actually die of drinking through asphyxiation or this sort of stuff. So
what you're telling me, Gabor, is that there's no expectation by these people that they're going to live a different life than they're living. That they're living. Mm-hmm.
They don't think of next week. The addict thinks of the next half hour, right, or the next hour. There's a really stark example in our film. The lady was talking about someone ODing on fentanyl, and they're there with them because addicts kind of stick together in groups if possible, as couples in particular, because, if you have an overdose, you have a friend that's going to help you. If you're overdosing by yourself, there's no one there to help, and the chances of perishing are much higher. There's one instance, she was with this guy who was wound up taking fentanyl, and she was reviving him, and he kind of came to, and then he started getting mad at her for taking his fentanyl from him, and getting into a fight, and you wouldn't think that would happen, and she said in the film, but you're dying. And you're going to die if we give you more. And he says, I want it anyway. These are the ironies of this kind of life. And it's very sad. And I don't know what the answer is. It's somehow psychological in many ways. It also has to do with our society and how we treat our children. Learning to treat children better is a much more difficult task, and it's a task that will take many, many years. It would take a generation.
At least a generation, I would think.
If not. So I don't think there's an easy fix to this problem.
No. So you said what you mentioned was at least half of the addicts in that area have a Native Canadian, First Nations background.
Yeah, I would think that's reasonably a number, and lots of times you go down there and you'll see a lovely young Native young lady all of a sudden wind up there out of nowhere, and I would chat with her. Well, where'd you come from? Well, I came from a reserve in Prince Rupert or somewhere. Presume that they would have left out of some sort of form of abuse, perhaps. I don't know. You're not able to really ask these questions of people. They wind up with other friends that have come into the downtown Eastside for a variety of reasons. My heart goes out to these young girls who wind up there. And of course, young boys as well from different reserves come through. They come and go.
You said many of them are very spiritual, so it's kind of interesting that they do have some spiritual connection to their culture, like their cultural beliefs.
They have a sense of spirit, and yet they're also suffering with these addictions at the same time, which is a real irony. It's a very difficult thing to figure out. But even many of the non-Native people as well are incredibly spiritual. That you see many of them, a couple of them that I've met, have been well educated. There was a gentleman that I became friends with. He was a psychologist, actually, in his younger days, and had very, very difficult relationships with his father. He became wrapped up in drugs in one way or another, and that life in the downtown Eastside had a certain level of comfort for him. When I knew him, he was in my book. He was actually an incredibly fit man. He worked in construction, and he would come home every day and have cocaine in his room at the Cobalt, and Next morning, he would go out to work in a heavy job. And this went on for about 3 or 4 years. And all of a sudden, slowly, the drugs took over. And he didn't wind up on the job. He couldn't do it anymore. And at that point, his life really went downhill. Drugs are so powerful, they just debilitate the human being in many ways. They offer great moments of euphoria and happiness, great moments of relief from pain. But on the other side, it creates tremendous depression as well, particularly cocaine, these types of drugs. Heroin, most heroin addicts, when they take heroin, they just kind of fall asleep. They're not aggressive. They kind of move along with everything. These other drugs, the fentanyls, and I forget the other ones now, but these more chemically produced products are much more frightening in terms of eliciting very, very bad behavior. But of course, from a photographer's perspective, I really love photographing people, and it's incredible. The camera is able to move into the soul of the person, which is so always been a mystery to me. The camera is a technical item, but it's also connected to your eye, which is your composition. But unless it's connected to your heart, to your sense of compassion.
What do you see when you look into their souls?
I actually personally feel a sense of personal euphoria in the image. I have a sense, for example, that I didn't really push the button. That I was simply there as a vehicle, and some other kind of spiritual entity introduced me to the situation. And I felt like I was like a passenger on a journey, and that feeling is what keeps me photographing, to obtain that feeling of, it's hard to explain, but it's a mystery of photography.
And is the euphoria the sense of having captured the person's soul, or is the sense of euphoria something that you feel is emanating from these people? Like there's something.
I think it's both. And also, your pictures, you have to see yourself in your picture. You are a part. What you are is a part of that photograph. This is why I was so excited about photographing in these rooms. Was I felt these incredible opportunities to actually see myself and realize who I was and how imperfect I was. I'm probably better off and had more advantages than the people I was with, but I was no better than they were. We were equal. Their soul and their spirit was every bit as equal as mine. That connection of being able to create that image, I think, is a gift from God to me, and I never feel that it was me doing it. It was always someone else, and so that kind of gives you a purpose for showing the souls of these wonderful people to the world, in a sense. And I know of really no other environment where that can happen, other than here in the downtown Eastside, which it's an incredibly magical area in that sense, that we're able to connect with these people spiritually and photographically. So I felt overjoyed to do that work, and I just can't wait to get back down there. I just sometimes a little bit afraid of it, but I can't be lucky forever,
Why not?
To a psychopath.
What was it that drew you to the downtown Eastside to begin with to do your photography?
I think a lot of people have a curiosity about the downtown Eastside. It's puzzling because one doesn't really know what to make of it, because here we are in a very prosperous country, a very prosperous city, and we have this incredible, it's like walking into a concentration camp in many ways. That whole stretch from Maine down Hastings all the way into the Cenotaph, in a sense, is almost as it was fenced in area of suffering And you wonder why that's here. Like you wonder why we have such a prosperous city and we have this incredible kind of area of suffering. Like Mother Teresa, I'm a great admirer of her work and how she kind of gathered the dying people in Delhi, that were kind of rotting on the streets. And I know she said that she sees Christ in the eyes of the suffering and the dying. And I view, when I look for Christ, I don't go to an expensive party at the Pan Pacific, where I will probably not see him, but I will see him in the eyes of the people in the downtown East Side. I'm a Christian myself, and of course, Jesus ministered to the poor, not so much the wealthy, to people that were in dire straits. It's amazing the number of religious discussions I've had with folks in the downtown East Side, and how many of them are believers in a spiritual world, in God, like, for example. You very rarely engage in that conversation elsewhere, because our society is becoming much more secular and much more, they don't believe in God, they believe in themselves.
Therein lies kind of their hope. Is that in their spiritual kind of connection is where their hope lies. They don't, from what I'm understanding from you, they're not hoping that they're going to somehow be delivered from the life they're living, which to us seems like suffering, and I would imagine to them it seems like suffering.
They don't view it as badly as we do. We suffer when we don't have enough gas in our car. When we don't have a nice outfit to wear, if we don't have our daily bath, or whatever we do, we feel deprived. And yet, for these folks, these are not big issues. Their biggest desire is to be relief from pain, from suffering, from abuse, from hurt. And you gotta remember, we have our families. We have, many of us, we have our spouses, we have our parents, we have children. We're all fortunate folks. But keep in mind that all these people were abandoned by everyone. And can you imagine having no connection with family and being totally alone? I see very few people walking down there visiting their children. Where is my son? Where is my daughter? You get a lot of people asking for money on the streets. I always give to someone that asks. If I give them $1 and they'll come up, or even if you give them 50 cents, they'll thank you with, like you wouldn't believe, because you took the time to actually give them something when they asked for it. But you give them $1, you acknowledge, which is nothing to us, but you acknowledge them as a human being.
And I would imagine also you're doing photography of them and your documentary of the two couples. That also gives them a sense of, personal feeling of I exist. I'm important. I have something to say.
And then the people, except perhaps one of them, I think, they view the film as a legacy in terms of them being able to tell their story. The downtrodden, the people that no one listened to, they have no voice. The people that have the voice are the wealthy, the talented, the handsome, the beautiful, all these people. They have voices all over the place. But the ones that are mutilated and hurt, they have very little their voice. And sadly, many of them are not able to articulate their stories. They cannot articulate. We're lucky that we have Harry Ashley is the protagonist or the main person, and this other lady as well, are very articulate people. So it was very, very wonderful to be able to hear them speak. and tell their stories so well.
Were you surprised by anything in terms of what they had to say or about how they lived their lives?
I'm surprised at how genuine they were and how truthful they were.
Mm-hmm.
Because that life is the life of a con artist, you know, because you have to be a con artist to survive. You have to be a sort of a con art to deal with the authorities, with the various dealers, and you get very good at manipulating everyone. In the sum total, it was a very honest movie, and it surprised me how honest everything was and truthful. Um, so I'm very proud of that aspect of it. But,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Anything else you want to talk, mention about,
I think the general public, should view folks there in a kinder light. I think would help them, and to view folks in the downtown Eastside as sort of undesirable, nasty people, it doesn't help them. And it certainly doesn't help you as well. That view it that way. And I just hope that this film and my book can kind of help people view it in a more spiritual sense. And I think any small move in that direction would be absolutely wonderful. So there are many caring people in the downtown East Side.
Yeah.
There are many people that do an incredible amount of work there and are very dedicated in helping.
Well, thank you very much, Gabor. It's been very enlightening, actually, to hear what you have to say. And probably you're one of the few people that have actually, had such a close-up, intimate view of people caught in this terrible cycle of addiction.
Right.
I totally appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was very enjoyable.